When I was in seminary, I had the honor of hearing the head of New Testament Studies at Vanderbilt University, Dr. Amy Jo Levine, speak. As I said, she is the head of New Testament Studies. The interesting thing about her, if you've read any of her writings, is Amy Jill is a Jew, not a Christian. She's not a Messianic Jew. She has not yet found that Jesus is God and the living Word. And in our conversations as we shared, she said to me, well, what proof can you give to me that Jesus is God? And we automatically go to resurrection. And she said, well, resurrection, you guys always assume that that's a Christian thing. But here we find in the Old Testament one of two stories of resurrection. Resurrection is a God thing, not a Christian thing. What else? And as we spoke, she could, I guess, look at each situation we threw at her, the belief in the disciples' hearts who wrote the scriptures, and she would stop and say, no, wait a minute now. You think that these are Christian writings. They're not. They're Jewish writings. These men were Jews who were ushering in what they believed to be the next chapter of the story of Judaism. And because they were authored by Jews, they're Jewish documents. They tell the tale of God's work, but they aren't canonized. And the historians in the room were quick to note out that the Old Testament was canonized, or what scriptures would be included in the Hebrew Bible as they know it today were established long before these writings were done. And that it was the Christian community who would later on follow and copy the Jewish lead and canonize their own set of writings in the New Testament, therefore pulling together what we know as the Bible today. They're Hebrew writings. Just like anything else, they can be read in the temple. What else? You still haven't proved to me yet. And whenever you're going, to try and convince a scholar of something they're convinced isn't true, good luck. Until the subject, what Christ did for me, came up. Well, why do you call that Christ, you would ask? That could be God. God's done amazing things. Look at Elijah. He's done wonderful things. He's seen miracles, performed miracles. God's performed it through him. It's still not enough proof. However, one student was quite passionate and stood up and talked about the difference that Jesus Christ made in his life. The difference that has happened in so many generations of Christendom. The difference that Christendom has made in the world all around the topic of healing, of restoration, and wholeness. He said it's as if the Jews forgot and the Christians claim we are in the resurrection business. We are a resurrection people. Not only because we follow the one who is resurrected, but we could just as easily follow the son of the widow today, those raised from dry bones, that Elias rose, Naam's daughter, and others, Lazarus. But we choose to follow the resurrected Jesus. But you see, I think there's something else that the Hebrew Scriptures teach us about resurrection. It's not what happened to Jesus and what we hope will happen to us when our life comes to an end. But we can rise above. After all, resurrection is being raised to new life and new hope. It is, in its purest form, healing. And healing, as we know, comes in many forms. I want you, as you listen today, as you meditate upon this word, to ask yourself this question: what am I rising above today? What new life is God giving me today? How is it that I'm living into the newness of that life? Because of Jesus Christ. How can I rise above the past, the pains, the hurts, the bad choices, the poor decisions of life? As I read the scripture text today, I read three things into this. First of all, Elijah calls to the Lord to do the healing. That healing comes through the power of God and no one else. It's not as if we claim or say, look what I did, but look what the Lord has done. The second thing I see in the text today is that it's not God's work alone. Elijah comes upon the young boy and says, Lord, give this son new life. We can be catalysts. We can be envoys of the power of God in a transforming way. That God calls us to be a resurrected people to help those who are hurting, those who are vulnerable, those who are outcast, find a place, find healing and strength. And the third is that we are called to step in the gap and to help those who are vulnerable. Elijah just doesn't stay with anybody. You see, Elijah comes to this woman's house in the earlier sections that were not read for you between last week and this week. In the 17th chapter, when he comes to her house, he says to her, woman, can you make food for me? The famine is so great in the land, she has limited resources, and she says to him, I'm not even sure I can make a meal for me and my son, and yet you come here and are bold enough to ask for that hospitality. And he says, have faith. And another miracle occurs. She makes the food for him, and more food is replenished. And God provides. And I believe out of that miracle, Elijah in the feeding of the ravens that we read about last week, and in the power given through him to bring about another miracle from God, no doubt, no question, that when he calls upon God's life-giving, transforming difference in the young dead boy, has no doubt that God will do it. We can make a lot of assumptions as to why 3 times he says, Lord. We might look to the Trinity, we might look to other situations. Sometimes our prayers are not answered on the first time. And I want to note a word of caution with you this week. Because I have known way too many people who have prayed for a certain type and a certain way of healing to come about. And when it doesn't come about, we assume that we have prayed wrong, or that God has taken a nap at the time of our prayers, or answering another call, that God doesn't care. All too often in the world, I hear today, you speak of a loving God. You speak of a God who cares, who heals, who nurtures, but yet God didn't do this for me. As if we put conditions upon what the power of God should do. One such example occurred in the church I just was serving in. The church had gone through a split. The pastor and some of the people had left, and God had brought a young, energetic, effervescent guy with his wife and his kids. And 5 months into his ministry, Pastor Jeff discovered he had stage 4 inoperable liver cancer and passed away before the congregation. There is an infamous picture in the church. I think it's in at least 3 different places, of the congregation coming around in a prayer service and laying hands on Pastor Jeff. And ironically, and maybe not more symbolically than else, they're in the shape of a cross as they lay hands on him. I remember the church secretary, as I looked upon one of the pictures that hung in the church office. She said, we believed coming out of that day that Pastor Jeff was going to be healed. But God had other plans. And I turned and looked at her and said, what do you mean? We were sure that he was going to come back to us. Okay? I said, don't you believe God healed him? Don't you believe the journey that he had as a faithful person until the end, when he took his last breath here on earth, was not rewarded with healing? That he was raised to life? After all, we are a resurrection. That today he sits at the table with an abundant feast, singing of God's glory. He's in the communion of saints. He's received the reward of his faith. Yes, his healing probably didn't occur the way you would hope, but that doesn't mean God's not listening. For many months, as the new pastor coming in, I would hear people share the basic message to me. What did you do to tick the bishop off so much that he would send you to us? It was a serious question, asked in various ways. And I kept saying, you are not God's castaway, God's throwaway. You are beloved children. And in your time together, when you knew that Jeff was limited in his capacity, you rose up. Resurrection occurred. New ministries were founded and started and strengthened. You found within you a leadership, a new and a bold way to be the church. A hurt and wounded community, helping a hurt and wounded world. Folks, as a church, how are you in any way disappointed at what God has done? Years ago, when I was a lay member of the church, I came up with a theology that the church is a spiritual infirmary. That all of us are sitting around, wounded, in our own ways, in our own battles, in our own past lives. We have discovered and been damaged by the world we live in. It's inevitable. And as you know, hurt people. But resurrected people can resurrect. And so we as a community who have found healing in only one physician, in only one way, through the power of God, can help others find the same. We can breathe new life into our souls, into our family, into our church, and into our world. That's what we're called to do. That's who we're called to be. We can actually use the hurts of the past and the times and the ways in which we have overcome them for the glory of God to help others who are wounded. Catalysts, if you will. Let me illustrate. When I went before the board of ordained ministry, and they heard of my story as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, one woman leaned over at the table and said, "Tell your story and tell it all." I thought that was a bit weird. Why would people want to hear about that? Second year, she said, "Are you telling your story and telling it all?" I hadn't. I don't understand why. Trust me, what can happen? So in boldness one day, it fit within the context of the sermon. I stood up and I shared with my faith congregation. I was serving my history in broad terms, not in details, much like you've heard. And some hearts were touched that day. One particular heart was a staff member who would work with me in the office next door. And she came into my office one day and said, "We have to sit down and talk." And I said, "Well, go ahead, have a seat." She said, "Not here." She came to my house that week and sat down and shared her own journey. Her own victory over being a child as well, childhood sexual abuse. And I asked one question. Because her story ended at the end of her tragedy and imprisonment, in her own situation. And I said, well, I don't understand. From where you were at that point, how did you get to be this strong, confident, beautiful woman that sits before me? I need to hear the rest of the story. No one had ever asked that question before. She went home and thought about it and had prepared, I don't know how many pages of notes. We sat down and we talked, and we found that God had sent angels amongst her to raise her up from the life that she was living. A couple months later, she comes into my office and she says to me, you know, I got this idea. I think God is telling us that we need to start a group of survivors of childhood sexual abuse. What was my response? I think we need to do this. I think there are others that would find healing in our journeys. Okay, let me think about this for a while. So, in the coming weeks, you come back in every once in a while. So, what do you think about my idea? What idea was that? Oh, yeah, okay. So how is this going to work? We're just going to, you know, I know people, you know people. We come together and we're just going to look at each other. You? You? So we decided that, you know, I would go in the town, I would talk to a couple psychiatrists and psychologists, and they would hopefully provide recommendations for a resource that could guide our conversation, so it wasn't just, you know, reliving the past. There might be a way toward healing. And as we were gaining some confidence in our idea before it was implemented, I put it in the bulletin just to see who would bite on this idea. 2 weeks later, the parish nurse shows up in my office. She says to me, "Are you crazy?" As we talk about this ministry. I said, "I get it. I've been there. I know what you're talking about." She goes, "No. Do you have like a whole network of people who are willing to do this? Because I got to tell you, Pastor, this is such a huge issue that you have no idea how overwhelmed you're going to be." And she was right. We started with 4 people. And every month thereafter, for the first 5 months that group came together, it doubled in size. I had learned from my own professional counselor, those of you who are counselors know that this probably violates every rule of counseling. My counselor would stand up at the end of our sessions every time, and he would give me a hug, and he would look me in the eye, and he would say to me, "This is not your fault." Say it back to me. And I would stand there, "It's not my fault." No. It's not your fault. Say it again. Dr. Jerry did that until he believed I believed what I was saying. There's something beautiful about safe sanctuaries, human touch, and someone rewriting the scripts in your mind. Someone saying that you can rise above. So I said to Peggy, my co-leader, "You know what? I want to end every session in the same way. I want us to stand up, I want us to hug each other, and I want us to say 3 things to each other. 1, this is not your fault. 2, Jesus loves you. And 3, that if you are living in pain and hurt and anger and frustration, this is not the life God had planned." Okay, we'll try it. So we got together, and Peggy and I shared our stories and said, you know, you could write them on billboards, put them on Facebook. There is nothing about what we have lived through. If you can't talk about your own story, do you think that there was someone who needs share with them ours? We're an open book. And as members of the group would share bits and pieces of their past, entrusting to us the most sacred places of their lives. Quite frequently you would hear me say, as they shared their anger and their frustration and their pain, this is not the life God had planned for you. About the end of our second session together when we were doing this, there was a gentleman in the group named Pete. And as we drew to a close and he knew we were going to get up and share with each other this moment, telling each other it until we believed it, and it embodied us, a new MP3 script was being written. Pete would make his way to the restroom and would hide. He'd wait for the noise in the gathering room to, dispense, and people got in their cars and went home. In several days, he'd open the door, and there Peggy and I were standing there, smiling. You're not getting away, Pete. And he was over there. Okay, fine. A year and a half later, I get a call from Peggy. We got to meet this week. And I said, what do you mean we got to meet this week? And she says, it's not on our calendar. We have a couple weeks to go. What's the deal? No, there's someone who has to share something. We have to meet this week. And as it turns out, our brother Pete had a spiritual experience in which God touched his heart. And he was finally able to give up the pain and the hurt in the past. And as we sat down and he shared his story, he said to me, do you know that every week when you looked at us and said, this is not the life God had planned for you, do you know how mad I used to get about this? You know how angry I used to get about this? I think to myself, who are you to have the gall to say such a thing to me? It shows that you don't understand my pain. And then went on to share the details of the weekend he just had and the fact that he had finally given up. The anger and the hurt and found healing and wholeness and forgiveness. He said, Joe, do you know how angry I was? I said, yeah, I know. You used to hide in the bathroom. He goes, oh, you knew that, did you? Yep. Did you notice we used to wait for you? Yeah. I wasn't going to leave without you guys hugging me. He said, Joe, don't stop telling people that. Because they need to hear it. No matter how angry or disappointed or hurt they might be. It's true. He goes, when I kept asking, why do you keep saying that? You kept saying, because I have found freedom from my past. And I want the same thing. So if you're here today, and you're still carrying the bitterness of poor decisions and bad choices, either by yourself or someone else, you have open wounds from the battle scars of this life and this world, I don't think it's fair to ask the question, Lord, is this because of my sin? Like the widow did. God wants you to know it's not your fault. That He loves you. And this is not the life that He had planned. Pete said to me, they were right. Tell your story and tell it over. And thus, we the church, we who have given our lives over to Christ, as we just sang about, take my life, can be a resurrected people. who resurrect people. We can journey with. Not that we ever take claims for the healing that takes place, but we can journey with those who need it. We can all be marginalized in many ways. We can be impoverished in hope, impoverished in health, impoverished in faith and belief. We can be impoverished in trust and love and grace. Let me tell you, that's not the life God had planned for you. You can rise above that slow death you're headed toward and find healing and wholeness. We have people in the church who can help you. We have many ministries that bring about healing. Whether it's those that prepare the communion table each week, hoping and praying over the elements that God would come in a special and beautiful way and cleanse you. Whether it's those that sing for God's glory, those that go out in the streets to feed those in need, to give hope to those who need help, to pray for, pray with, and be prayed upon. God's children. We have people who are sojourners on the journey of life when we reach the difficult times. Pastors, counselors, Stephen ministers, who don't have the answers but know and pray to the one who does. We are in the ministry of wounded healers, helping wounded. That's who we are. That's what it means to pick up your cross, your own burdens, your own pain, and give it to God in glory. We don't have to just be hurt people who hurt. We too can rise above. And I believe that is also what it means to be a resurrected. We're in the business of healing in multiple ways. Let me listen forward. Spiritual healing. It is my hope each week when we gather for worship that somebody, in some way, walks away feeling the presence of God. That's what this is about. We give ourselves to God in praise and worship to model the life that this week will unfold. To be nourished and strengthened here that we might go and nourish and strengthen. We might avail ourselves in various ways of our knowledge of physical and natural healing measures for body and heart. We might provide the emotional healing of loving, touch, and of caring. And we might heal in social ways, sprinkling forgiveness, allowing it to wash over us, and let the residue of that wash over others. The church sits within a hurting world. Will we preach resurrection? Will we teach resurrection? Will we facilitate resurrection? That's the ministry and the business that we're about. So I want to offer you an opportunity. If you want to come forward this morning, if you want to partake again of a body broken and blood shed, by all means, let these elements wash over you, nurture you, strengthen you. If you're in need of the compassion of another who wants to listen, to pray for, to invoke the power and the Spirit of God in your life, they will be in the front rows, both Stephen ministers and myself. This week we are all challenged with the same thing. How is it that God will use me as a healing force, as a healing source for a hurting world?